Hello and welcome to the last day of YouTube videos for History Seminar. This is day 14, week 7. This is for Wednesday, technically your last day of class. And all I'm talking about today is the events at the very end of World War II. So when I last left, we were talking about the fact that Truman had decided to use the atomic bomb. The plane was called the Enola Gay. It was named after the pilot's girlfriend, and it was a B-29 Superfortress, if you know what those are. And so it was on the island of Tinian, and by strange coincidence, if Ellie McPhee is watching the video, this is the island that her great-grandfather was a ground crewman at the airfield at Tinian, and probably watched the Enola Gay take off on that day. The bomber took off. A weather plane went before it, flew over the city of Hiroshima, which was the primary target, to prove that the weather was clear so they'd be able to hit their aiming point to drop the bomb. The bomb was loaded inside the plane throughout the night, and it would only be armed once it was in the air and they were far enough away from Tinian that if they armed the bomb and it accidentally decided, oh, I've hit something, and exploded itself, that it wouldn't hurt the people on the island. If the plane crashed on takeoff, the bomb might also be okay because it wasn't armed. So Enola Gay took off following the weather plane, flew to Hiroshima. The people of Hiroshima had no idea. They saw the plane, but bombing raids of hundreds of planes, that was something to worry about. A single enemy plane flying over the city, checking the weather or something, they didn't even blink an eye. Anyway, they dropped the bomb, and the bomb detonated over the city. It didn't ever actually hit the ground. It detonated about 1,000 feet over the city. And immediately, the explosion went down and outward, causing a massive concussion and a blast wave that knocked down things for miles. And then the explosion itself picked up all the debris and ash and took it up into the sky, creating a giant mushroom cloud, almost like a volcanic eruption. And that's why you get this weird iconic symbol of, if there's a massive bomb or a nuclear weapon going off, that you see a symbol of a mushroom cloud. It all comes from Hiroshima. So once that had happened, what they didn't, they recognized how much damage it would do to the city, and it did. Thousands and thousands of people died. They didn't realize the after effects of radiation, and the fact that it would cause massive radiation burns on human beings for miles away. Some people just vaporized. And then the radiation would stick around in the weeks and months that followed, and the rain that fell would be radioactive, and everything on the ground was radioactive, and so people would get sick and die of different kinds of cancers and things. Their teeth would fall out, their hair would fall out, they get sores all over their bodies, and then they would just die. Their internal organs would kind of liquefy. So anyway, that bomb was dropped on August 6th, and after it happened, the Japanese weren't really sure what that was, and the Americans made the announcement to the Japanese, hey, we told you we had this weapon. If you don't surrender right now, we're going to drop another one. The Japanese response was, I don't know what that was, but we still don't believe you. And so the second plane, the Flying Boxcar, which you can see in the Dayton Wright-Patterson Air Museum down in Dayton, Ohio, that plane was loaded up with a second bomb, and that bomb was headed for the city of Osaka. And the weather plane reported, when they were halfway there, that the city of Osaka was completely clouded over and there was no way they were going to see the target area. So they headed for the secondary target, which is Nagasaki. They got over Nagasaki. There were some clouds, but they could see the bridge, which was the aiming point, and the river that went right through the middle of town, and that's where they dropped the bomb. The city of Nagasaki was in a valley, so the damage was different, but still catastrophic. I don't know the exact number, remember off the top of my head, something like 58,000 people died instantly. Just boom. And then, of course, thousands of people died in the days and weeks afterward. After the second bomb, the United States said, we have an endless supply of these bombs and we will keep dropping them. Now, that was a complete lie. It would have taken weeks for us to get the parts together, to have assembled more bombs to drop them. But we told them we're just going to keep doing it until you surrender. This caused a kind of a peace coup d'etat in the Japanese government. The emperor kind of regained control of his country. They ousted General Tojo, and they removed the military fascist leaders that were running the country. And Emperor Hirohito got on the radio, and actually, for the first time ever, the people of Japan heard the emperor's voice. He announced that the Japanese were going to surrender. He never said they were wrong. He just said that they were he was ordering them to stop fighting because they had done everything they could do, but there was no way they could win. And so the Japanese simply stopped fighting. The Americans landed a few weeks later. Records were made of the emperor's speech to take out to areas where there were no radios, rural areas, and the record was played for groups of Japanese so they would believe it was true. Now, the Americans landed in Japan just a few weeks later, and the Japanese simply greeted them and stacked up their rifles and said, "What do we do now?" It was very strange for the Americans to have the Japanese be polite and not fight back. But at that moment, the occupation of Japan begins. Within a week, the United States Navy had parked itself in Tokyo Harbor, and on the deck of the battleship Missouri, the Japanese came out onto the ship and signed the formal surrender papers ending the war. And that is why, if you go to Hawaii now, parked next to the wreck of the USS Arizona is the USS Missouri, because the Arizona was the ship that symbolized the first day of the war, and the Missouri was the ship that symbolizes the last day of the war. And you can climb all around on the Missouri and take the tour. And right on the spot, I think if you've been on the ship, you know there's a big plaque at the spot where the Japanese signed the papers to end the war. And of course, the guy in charge was General MacArthur, the showboat general of the Pacific. So Japan surrenders on 14 August 1945, and this is known as VJ Day, Victory over Japan Day. And at that moment, the war is truly over, for most. There are groups of Japanese who continue to hold out for days and weeks and months because they don't know the war is over, and they refuse to believe it. There are some diehards. My favorite is Lieutenant Hiro Onada. He was in the Philippine Islands. He was on an obscure island that the Americans didn't pay much attention to, and when the war ended, they just kind of ignored it. For years, the Philippine farmers talked about the fact that there's some Japanese guys running around out in the woods who don't believe the war's over. And that was Lieutenant Onada and his men. I think they were about a 10-man team. They were a reconnaissance team, and their job was to radio to Japan when flights of American planes came over. Well, planes stopped coming. Lieutenant Onada surrendered in 1975, I think, 74, 75. I was like 10 or 11 years old when Lieutenant Onada finally walked out of the jungle and surrendered. So yeah, that's Die Hard. And they had to play a record of the Japanese emperor reading the surrender document for him to come out. So I'll end with that. Be a diehard like Lieutenant Onada. Have a great summer, and I will see you all, maybe, in the fall. Bye-bye.